Bonjour, and welcome on the Gospel Spice podcast, where you are invited to taste and see that the Lord is good. Gospel Spice is your Christ-centered podcast, infused with in-depth biblical flavors and sprinkled with a dash of French culture to spice up your relationship with God. Here is your host, Stephanie Roussel, with a guest today.
Bonjour, this is our last conversation for 2023. I have a very special episode for you in just a few days to cap off the year. It's my own personal story. But before we get there, today I want to share with you what has proven to be our most popular interview of the year 2023. It aired in January, so almost a full year ago. It's my conversation with Naomi Zacharias on Third Ladder, which is the nonprofit she launched and that Gospel Spice is financially supporting. It comes to the help of victims of human trafficking and other forms of injustice all over the world. And then she talks a lot, mostly in the second half of the conversation, about what it looks like for her and her family several years into everything that's been going on with her father, about holding on to hope when life doesn't make sense at all. So our most popular conversation of 2023, it's a replay. I'm taking this week off and I cannot wait to be with you in 2024 with all of the conversations that we are already recording. I know there's some exciting stuff down the pipe and continuing Jesus, Rabbi, and Lord. And by the way, thank you to those of you who have expressed that the series Jesus, Rabbi, and Lord is touching you and is allowing you to experience Christ in deeper ways. That's the only reason we exist. Can I be honest? Gospel Spice exists so that you can go deeper in your relationship with God. We hope to make things new and fresh and exciting, and let us know, because if you don't tell us, we don't know. And that's really our primary motivation, is to know that God is growing ever closer to you and that Gospel Spice has a little part to play in that. So it would make a wonderful year for us in 2024 if we could hear from you. So in the meantime, here is a replay of my conversation with Naomi Zacharias. Enjoy. So Naomi, my dear friend, so good to have you back on the show.
It's so good to see you again, Stephanie.
Oh, it is so good to see your precious, friendly face. I just really love you so much. So how are you doing, my friend? Tell me.
Well, when people ask that question, I feel like sometimes the most honest answer is when you just feel like, I'm here, I'm here. So, I think it's been a challenge the last couple of years, and a tremendous challenge. And I think much that, many of the things that were strongholds in my own life were kind of knocked down and kind of swept away in that sense. But I think, you ultimately have a choice in those. And I'm saying that carefully because it's not that easy, to be honest. Like, my kids, for me, probably saved me in so many ways because there wasn't the choice to just give up and lay down and die kind of thing. So I think, whatever those things are in our life that we can recognize, require us and need us, they can be the things that are our own lifeline in those times to keep going. So yeah, it's been a year. It's been a few years of, and I wouldn't say I'm there yet. And as far as you're trying to almost rebuild life in a sense. So here, I think, is the way I would answer that. But I think that is no small thing for any of us, right? The choice to remain.
You're here. Amen to that. That is worth celebrating. It is a victory. You're still breathing. You're still worshiping. You're still trusting the Lord hard as it is, and you're still here for your children. So tell us about them. Tell us a bit about your precious little ones, or not so little. My goodness, they're growing so fast.
They are growing up. They, my oldest is 11, so that's my oldest is Jude, and then Isabella is 9, Nico is 7, and Jack is 5. So 3 boys and a girl. So they definitely keep me on my toes, especially sweet little number 4, who's just a fireball.
Is he the one that one day you posted a picture of him drinking coffee or something?
Yes. Yes. He drinks it like black. I mean, he drinks black coffee, and that is so him. Like, he's basically, like, if you've seen the movie Boss Baby, that's Jack. Like, if he could wear his like suit and bow tie like every day and sip his coffee and tell us how to organize life in the world, he would. He's hilarious. So he's my one. He's got a little bit more of a tough exterior, where he's like total teddy bear on the inside. And then Nico is the joy, like he just is. And Nico, I might have told you, so I won't take too long going into all this, but if you ask about my kids, I can go on for a long time. But Nico was my pregnancy where they didn't know if he was going to make it. And if he did, they thought there were going to be multiple issues with it. And I do feel like I have told Nico, like, I don't think I will ever have to wonder if I didn't get a miracle. I know I got at least one miracle in you. And I do feel like those were prayers answered to preserve that life. But he has just been like nothing but this joy. He keeps us all alive in that joy. And then Isabella is just a total sweetheart. And Jude's my oldest, who has always been like, he's just my sweet protector. And I could talk to him all day long. So he's just a beautiful, deep old soul. So I am very lucky. I'm lucky to have them. And they, as I said, like they have saved me, and I'm so grateful for them. So they're doing well. They're doing well in school, and gone through a couple of transitions too with new schools and all that, and doing well. And we're about to celebrate Christmas. So
yes. How's your mom doing?
She's my mom. So I will just answer that honestly, because there just doesn't seem to be any point in wasting anyone's time while saying things that like aren't entirely true. But in many ways, I mean, when people ask me that, I don't think my mom will ever be the same, So I don't know if I feel like I can ever say my mom is okay. My mom has an incredibly strong faith, and her faith has not wavered for 1 second. I can't say that about myself. And yet my mom has just been like so strong in the character of the Lord that she knows to be true. And I have more respect for her now than I even ever did before. So my children adore her. Don't know what we would do without her. She's actually here right now trying to keep my little ones somewhat quiet while we do this. So that's a very tall order. So we'll see.
Sounds like she is just the right person to make it happen. So,
yeah, if anyone can do it, it's her.
Yes. So we're getting ready to enter 2023. What are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? I think, well, I'm going to answer that first. I think from the perspective of even Third Ladder, is that okay?
Yeah, go for it. Yes, absolutely. So tell us about Third Ladder a little bit for those who have never heard about it, and then tell us more.
Third Ladder is an organization that I launched together with my team, and we launched it in 2020. So we're entering 2023. And so as far as what I'm excited about, I think anytime you start a new endeavor, a new initiative, a new organization, you don't know exactly how well it's going to do. It is a leap of faith. It is an act of faith and a labor of love. And I feel like this was nothing short of that for us. We were a team. There are 4 of us, and we were a team of 4 women who had worked together previously and had seen that come to a close in a very heartbreaking way for all of us. And I think the decision to then take the risk to step out together to try to launch this initiative, because we believed in it so much. And what we were doing before was distributing grants to humanitarian organizations working with women, children, men, families at risk around the world. And we didn't feel like that mission was finished for us. And so we made the decision to try to launch this. But I mean, all of us sitting around together, really recognizing the risk of this. And I think I shared with you a little bit, Stephanie, that there is this question you have to ask yourself, saying, I don't know if this is going to work or not. And if it doesn't work, not only will I be tremendously disappointed, but you are aware of almost this public then, failing in that sense. And I know that shouldn't determine any next steps for any one of us. But I think if we are honest, like we're all aware of that, right? And we're all affected by that. And none of us are wanting to weather that and to feel the sting of that. But it really came down to, I felt such a genuine love and admiration and responsibility to projects that I believed in and to a mission that I believed in. And for my team, I love this team. I have always loved my team, and I would do anything to champion them. And so it came down to, okay, I feel a responsibility. That's the bottom line, a sense of responsibility to step forward in faith in this way. And if God gives it 2 months and it provides projects 2 months of support, and if it provides my team with 2 months of doing what I think they're amazing at doing well, then that is a win. Whether the rest of the world might recognize it or not, it would be a win, and it would have served a beautiful purpose. And if God continues it for a year or 5 years or 10 or 20, then what an amazing gift that would be. So however long he gave us, we were here just to answer what we all actually felt like was a calling. And then through that, I think we were all going through a period of grief together. And to be able to do that together, I think was a really unique and special experience, to not just kind of have that wedge go between us and be all sort of scattered in different ways, trying to process some of those things individually, and not being able to lean on each other for support in that way would have been a very different experience. So to be able to stand by each other in that way, to grieve together, and to be honest about that together, and to see something new come to life was, I think, incredibly meaningful for all of us. Somebody said to me once, and I have not forgotten this, but he said this, it was probably 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, but he made the comment to me, and he was like, wherever there is a death, there will be a resurrection. He was like, it's the gospel story, and it is present everywhere in life. And when he said that, I just couldn't picture any kind of resurrection of any kind, whichever layer you were talking about. And so to now see that reflection of that, even in the way of third ladder, that enduring what was a painful death for all of us, and seeing somehow life come in spite of that, through that, however you want to word that piece of it, and to see something true and good and worthy take place and continue, I think was probably helpful and restorative for all of us. So 2023, I think part of me, because we started that way with a bit of trepidation and just feeling like this is the next step we know for today. And let me tell you, like, all of them took a risk. All 3 of them had other job offers. And to choose to do this, to me, like at the time, I just thought, honestly, I wasn't even sure like what to encourage them to do. They got other job offers, and, I felt like, you know what, it's the safer way to go. You'd have my full support if you take that. And on paper, you should take it, if you choose to do this, like, we're in it together. But they didn't choose to stay because of practical reasons and for job security. I can tell you that. And so I think too, maybe that almost binds you and makes for a very rich foundation for a new organization. Like, everybody was there out of nothing but sheer belief. It wasn't an easy choice. It wasn't a smooth thing. And so to have seen it grow and develop has been wonderful. And so entering 2023 with it still going, I'm not sure I thought we would get there. And we still operate month to month. We say all the time, like, we are here as long as God calls us to be here. And as long as he keeps this organization going, it is his. And we are committed to being here as long as this is where he wants us to be. So that's third ladder. And so our mission is to, we provide due diligence for organizations overseas that are working with that are working with teams helping people who are in situations in life where they are really needing some human support. And that has included, it's care for the elderly, it's combating human trafficking, it's reaching out to victims of human trafficking, it's education for children, it's care for burn victims in India. And these are organizations that we've known for some period of time. And I will say too, I think this process has made us grow, helped us to grow even closer to them. When we were looking at starting Third Ladder, it was amazing to me how I think some of our greatest champions were the projects and organizations. And it really was a bit of a dynamic shift, right? Like we had been in this position where our desire was always to support them, to be in this supportive capacity. And somehow all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, like it flipped, right? And you had these organizations who, after finding out they were not going to have certain support continued, some of them were facing shutting down for good. Like they were that dependent on the support. And yet what we were hearing from them is just, we are for you. We are so here for you. Like you have loved us. Like we are not going anywhere. Like it was amazing to me that there was such a perspective of now surrounding us and saying, we are championing you and we'll be here for you in any way that you need us. Nobody was writing saying like, how soon can you do this? When are we going to get that grant? And yet we knew they were in desperate circumstances. But they were just there for us in such an incredibly supportive and loving capacity that it has, I think, just deepened a mutual respect for each other and changed a dynamic of a relationship that I personally really love. It feels almost in many ways more appropriately human, where there's a recognition and awareness of brokenness on either side. And by that, I mean where life just has not gone the way everyone wishes it would, and that it seems like it ought to. And yet you can see that for each other and be there for each other and walk that out together.
So just to explain a little bit, most of the projects you're working with today, you used to work with before Third Ladder, and you've really picked them up and carried the care you have for them in this through the new structure of Third Ladder, right? So do you want to tell us maybe just help us understand what you've done, 2020, 21, 22. Give us some ideas of the projects. Do you want to dive into a couple maybe of the ones that stand out to you in thought right now?
So yes, the vast majority of them are projects that we previously had relationships with and had been participating as a team and giving grants and doing that process of due diligence. One thing I will say that we really wanted to do with Third Ladder that is a bit unique is we really wanted what we call it kind of a modern approach to humanitarian giving. And what we want to really do is recognizing that when all of us do financial planning, whether it's our budgeting or whether anybody's working with a financial planner, there's kind of this long-term look at how can I manage these? This is what my goal is. How can I manage this? We really wanted to take some of those principles and even those practical ways of doing that and apply them to charitable giving to help somebody make those decisions on how do they want to do their charitable giving? What's a long-term plan for that? What's a short-term plan for that? How can they allocate their resources that way? And so with Third Ladder, they can designate their funds to any particular project. And that we have always felt like is important to us just because we're really wanting to help people engage with the particular human needs that are on their heart. It's not the same for all of us. And I think there's a reason for that because there is this world full of profound human need. And if every one of us were drawn to one, it would leave all of this unmet and unanswered over here. And so we wanted to be a place where somebody could come and find that particular need that they want to say, look, how can I actually make a difference in this? There's a lot of ways to give out there. There are endless needs and countless ways to give towards it. But how do you find a way that you trust? How do you know that your funds are being given for their intended purpose? How can you stay connected to that part of the process? Everybody's gift, no matter what the amount is, it was hard-earned. And everybody's gift, it is not easy to separate with that. That is a choice. I think that is an admirable choice for anybody because for all of us, whatever we've got, it's so much easier to hold it close and to use it ourselves. It is an act of sacrifice. But within that, then there is a real sense of, I think, a rightness to knowing what that is going towards, to knowing that your gift was honored, that it went to its intended purpose. It's actually much easier to give when you know that. It's harder when it kind of goes into this abyss out there and you aren't sure if it accomplished anything for anyone. So being an active part of that process, being able to know which project it's going to. We sent out reports to each donor this year to give them an update on their giving, to outline, the organization itself, where the funds were, how the funds were being distributed, but also any specific project that person had given to, they received a report on that project. This is exactly what happened with this project. This year. This is what your funds went to. This is what it accomplished. And so really wanting to provide that in the same sense that you might get a financial report on your investments during the year. That's what we were essentially trying to provide. So we have really enjoyed that part of it, and we have visions and ways that we want to continue to improve that. And we had those from the beginning, but we have to move like at a pace that we can handle financially and that we can manage well. So we do have ways that we envision growing that and making that even more kind of partner friendly, if you will, and allowing people to access those reports as they want to. So we are working towards those goals now too. But back to your question, as far as projects. So I was actually looking at some of the pictures. So one is a home for the elderly, and this is in India. And this one, I was thinking back, I think the first time I visited them was in 2004, which is so hard for me to believe. But it's called Little Drops, and it was started by two childhood friends. They were men who were successful in the professional world and left their jobs to begin Little Drops. And Mother Teresa actually cut the ribbon for them at their opening ceremony. They were inspired by some of her homes that she is famous for establishing in Calcutta in India. And hers is the home for the dying and destitute. Theirs, from the time I saw it, one of the things I will say I have loved about it is just the light. And I say that, and I mean it in so many ways. There's color everywhere. It's very alive. The walls look alive. The bedding looks alive. When you walk through with Paul, who is their director, he knows every single man and woman's name. He calls them by name as he walks you through room after room after room. And that is something I always notice. So for example, if we're doing a visit to a children's home and the director is taking me through and I notice he doesn't know some of the children's names, that's a bit of a flag for me. We're looking for a place that is creating such a safe environment for the people that it's responding to, and to know someone by name, I think is a particularly important piece of that. So it's just a sweet place. They actually have 6 acres in Chennai, and when they bring an elderly person in, so these are men and women that are living out on the street. So they have been abandoned. They don't have a home, and they have nowhere else to go. And they will pick them up. They have their little ambulance that's their own, and they will bring them to their facility. They provide any medical treatment that's needed. They have a home for the rest of their lives. So they provide nutritious meals each day. There's a garden, there's a chapel on the grounds. They are part of a community. And when they do pass away, there is a proper ceremony for them and burial, which is very important for them culturally, which is even from a human perspective, that their life is honored in that way, and that they know that they have been seen and they are not living those final days of their lives alone. So that's a sweet one. We've always loved that project. And when I was looking at the pictures yesterday, I was just still thinking these pictures are so beautiful. The faces are so beautiful. There is something about a face that tells so much of a story, like the lines on a face. And I think we live in a culture where we do everything to prevent signs of aging, right? The creams and the treatments and the everything. And I'm not passing judgment on that. But you look at a face that just is marked with stories, and I think I just don't want to look away. It's beautiful and so intriguing. And those lives are filled with stories. So that's one that we've always held really dear to us. There's another one called Agni Raksha that treats men, women, and children who are victims of burning. The number one reason for the burns are domestic violence. The second one is suicide. And the third are household accidents. So for the children, the most common reason is if there's an act of domestic violence and the mother is burned, the children will often run in to try to help her and try to save her, and they end up being burned themselves. So those stories are laced with a lot of tragedy. I remember one of the first times I was there, it was a young man. He was around 20 or 21 and covered in these burns on his chest and clearly in so much agony as they were treating him. And I remember, and his had been a suicide attempt, but I remember looking at him and just wondering, like, what happened? What is his story? What happened in his story that carried him to such a place of desperation that not only would he want to end his life, but that he would do it in such a painful way? I feel like there must be so much layered within that, and to see him suffering in that way, but seeing these hands helping him and treating those wounds and him allowing somebody to treat those wounds. They provide all of their treatment free of cost because they are meeting a need within village communities where there is no other option for healthcare and no access to medical care and no ability to afford medical care. And that's the community they're working within.
I'm speechless hearing these stories. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for enabling that to happen, because I think I want to live in a world where we do right those wrongs. And so thank you for reminding us that it does happen.
Listen, I mean, these groups that we work with, my opinion from kind of working in this humanitarian field for the last, I guess, nearly 20 years or so, is that there's a lot of corruption out there. It's not easy to find, I think, meaningful work being carried on through methods of integrity. And both those pieces matter, and it's difficult to find them together. But I will say the ones that we have found, I just feel like these are remarkable people. And I tell their stories to my kids because these are present day heroes. There are people out there who are sacrificing their lives in such phenomenal ways. And I think our team would say too, when we first started this, like our focus was so much on the program that they were working with. And we soon realized too, is the people on the front lines need support. Like there is such a loneliness to being on the front lines there. You know, when we go for visits, we go and we're there for a couple of days and we're trying to bear witness to what's happening and ensure that certain things are functioning and review books and meet with beneficiaries and essentially be eyes and ears on the ground for our partners. But you go and then we come back home, right? And you come back home, you're not the same. And it takes a number of days even to process what you've seen. I mean, that is totally different than living in it, you know, day after day and going back to it every day. You know, the intensity of what they're seeing, the heartbreak of what they're seeing, the injustice of what they're seeing. And I think the rates of depression for the people in the front lines are so high. And so that's become something that we really try to focus on as well, is providing some staff care for each of the organizations that we work with. And so in the last couple of years, that's something we went back to each one with some ideas for staff care for their particular needs and wanting to be able to do that. And their response was so amazing. It was so overwhelming. And you realize that almost it shouldn't be, right? It shouldn't be that uncommon, but they are just, they're remarkable men and women doing this hard work out there, trying to provide healing and restoration for people who have been so wounded by this life.
Oh, I could sit here and listen to those stories and want to be a part of that. So you were saying, you know, you've been doing this for almost 20 years. That's hard to believe. Mm-hmm. That's a great burden for you to have seen so much and to be a part of it for so long. Would you maybe walk us, have you noticed any difference in how care for the unloved ones, the abandoned ones, how care has changed over the last 20 years in the places that you've seen?
The first thing that comes to mind is where I've probably seen the most noticeable difference is in the area of human trafficking. Initially, I think as people became more aware of this issue going on globally and exactly how horrendous it was and how prevalent it was, there was such a focus on the rescue side, which obviously is critical and needs to be there. But I don't think we necessarily thought through the restoration side as much. So the focus initially was so much on how do we help bring somebody out of this, but then to what? And you can't just remove somebody from what has been such an abusive, horrible, essentially imprisoned kind of experience. And then the desire was to sort of set them free from that, but without the resources or way forward to build a new life. I think leaving a life that has been painful, and as much as you hate it, it's still what is known. And so, although it's layered with things that you hate and nothing that you actually want your life to be, there is a level of comfort in simply knowing how it functions. You know your role in it. You know what happens. You know this expectation of you. And so when you take somebody that's been living that way and you try to set them free, but there's nothing to go towards, they are either going to probably end up back in that same situation, or they may find a new way of living that is not necessarily any healthier for them. So where I've seen the change is now like more focused on, programs working together. That's okay. That would be the first thing. The second thing was also people realizing that they couldn't do everything well. So one organization trying to do the rescue part and the restoration part and reintegration, is the term used for kind of back into like society in a certain way. I think a lot of organizations realize like we can't be an expert at all those things. So rather than trying to do the whole process, who can we network with? If we do this, like who does this? We can partner together. And I have seen growth in that way. I think human trafficking is, it's, one of the great atrocities of our time. I'm saying this carefully because it might not be a popular statement, but when I see things out there, that talk about ending human trafficking, if we just do A, B, or C, we can end human trafficking. There's a part of me that feels like a little discouraged by that, only because I think that I'm not sure we will ever completely end it while we are on this earth. I think the human heart is so evil, and it is one of the very, in some ways, easy way to exercise a particular kind of evil. I heard a pimp say one time, it's more lucrative than guns. I can only sell a gun one time, but I can sell a human being over and over and over. Well, when you hear that and you hear that mentality and you realize the brokenness within it, the person who has brought into it has been abused. But if you stop and think about the one that brings them into it, what happened in their life? That's not a normal, healthy human desire or goal. I can't believe that some little boy or girl wants to grow up and be a trafficker one day, right? So what happened to them? On every side of this, there's somebody who was a victim of something at some point in their life. And that means to try to end this is a much more widespread, deep, layered problem. So, I think sometimes when we set those kinds of goals for ourselves, on the one hand, there's a balance, right? We shouldn't stop advocating for it and fighting for it until it ends. That is absolutely true. But kind of setting this goal, if we do A, B, and C this year, we're going to end it. I think the risk we run there is that the ones who participate in that kind of campaign become very discouraged in a year or two when the numbers are the same or going up. In that sense, then I'm not helping. I can't do anything with this. I'm going to switch over to this issue is what tends to happen. And so I think setting those realistic expectations for people that we live in a horribly broken world, and these things are not going to be fully righted until the world itself is redeemed and all of these things are made right. But we have this human responsibility, obligation, and privilege to do whatever we can to bring that kingdom above here on earth, for that taste of that kingdom to come, and to make those things right in the best way that we can, and to advocate for that each every day of our lives.
For the one.
For the one.
It's always for the one.
It's always for the one. And we are also, I think, a culture that so much is judged by numbers. in percentages, and we want to see that, 100% of those brought out of trafficking stay out of trafficking. That's not a realistic number. And if I see that number in an organization we're reviewing, that's a flag, because life is too complicated and this kind of atrocity is too complicated. But is it G.K. Chesterton that used to say that Jesus's favorite audience was an audience of one? I'm not sure I've got that author correct. I need to go back and look that up for sure. But there's such a beauty to that, isn't there? That one. If I can connect that back to what we were saying with the name, there was an interview or a book I looked through several years ago with a pimp who'd written on the ways to get a girl into trafficking. And one of the things that he said was that he always changes her name. And he said it took a little while because she didn't want to answer to it first. But the day that she answered to the name he had given her, he knew he had won, because he knew she was accepting the identity that he had placed on her. And that seemed so powerful to me. It actually gives me chills even now. But when we think about the identity of the one, the identity of being created in the image of God, and that name that he has given each one of us, that it says he calls us by name, that sacredness there to that, we should never minimize the value of the one. I mean, what an incredible privilege if we go through this life and we can recognize and come alongside or help to restore or help the one respond to their true name. What a gift that is to be part of that story for them. And you have to look at it, I think, that way, and realize that the one will also impact many more ones in their way. And our focus has to be on the individual themselves. And I think to truly respond to it in an individual way, we have to be. If we start to get the whole in our minds, you lose sight of the one.
So true. And exactly what you were saying earlier, one organization or one person cannot reach everyone and do everything. But if you equip the handful of ones that God has called you to, then they too, Paul tells Timothy, what you have seen me do in the presence of many witnesses, I now entrust to you, so that you will tell others who will tell others. So it's just that idea of, Paul says, hey, I've worked on you, Timothy. Now you go and tell others, and they tell others. Just the one, focusing on the one.
Yeah.
Okay, back to what you were saying about little drop or little drops, right?
That drops.
One, the elderly. You mentioned the chapel. Does that mean that Little Drops only serves Christians? So how does that work?
So the founders of Little Drops are Christians, and so it is a Christian organization, but they serve anyone. Anybody that comes in. The Christian faith is not forced upon them. It is lived out for them. That's the way I would put it. Yeah. It is shared with them in that way.
And how does Third Ladder function with that? I understand you do not only work with openly Christian organizations. Can you unwrap that for us?
Yeah. Third Ladder is not, and I'm actually glad you asked that, because there's been a lot of, I think, question about that. Third Ladder is not a ministry, and it is not registered as a Christian organization. The four of us on staff are Christians and have a shared faith in that way, and it is what drives and compels us to do what we are doing. But we also feel like the life of Christ did not model for us that we should only be coming alongside others who share our faith. There is a rightness in the message of the gospel that is upholding a human being who carries essential worth and is made in the image of God. And that has its own place and is in its own right. And so as far as partners that we work with, and by partners, I mean donors. So we use the term partners, but we have Christian donors, and we also have some who are not Christians. The projects that we distribute grants to, we have Christian organizations, and we have other organizations that are not Christian organizations. So there is, you have some people who are wanting to come and give, and it is important to them that the organization have a shared faith that they do. And so they will direct their giving to that project. The ones I do want to say, the projects we have that are not Christian organizations have been particularly meaningful relationships for us. And, I might say, even as I'm sitting here saying that to you, thinking about even the last couple of years and the way Third Ladder came about, that those organizations continued to stand by us as a team. And it would have been very easy for them to walk away. And in fact, one day I'd like to ask them why they didn't. I haven't asked that question yet. But we had developed a really strong relationship with them before then, and that has only continued. In fact, I was reading an email that one of them sent today, and I was just thinking, I love this organization, and I love this relationship that we have established with them that has become like, it's one of just such mutual care and kindness. They know what we believe and why. It's never forced upon them. Nobody's required to attend church to work with us or to receive a grant or anything like that. But it does come out in conversation. As I said, it's not registered as a Christian organization. It is not attached to a ministry. It is not a ministry. And so in that way, it is an entirely separate entity. But, because there is a relationship with each one of these, it does come up naturally in discussion and even in that way. And I think that that has been, and I think they would say the same thing, that it's been meaningful on both sides. For one, I think it's so easy to draw lines in our world. And if you don't believe everything the other person believes, like we can't help each other. We can't respect each other. We can't treat each other with a human love and
basic
care.
decency. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And to be able to come together and do that. And as I said, like our relationship with these projects were in a unique place that it's been reciprocal, but we have both cared for each other, regardless of those differences. And I think as one who does have that faith, I think we are called to live our lives in such a way and to treat other human beings with a kind of dignity and love and the love of Christ. I don't think the reason for that should be hidden. That's another conversation, because I've probably grown a little bit in that from when I first started. When I first started, I think the power of the work itself was enough. I knew why I was doing it, but it was just the power of the work. But I realized, again, probably specifically in that area of trafficking and prostitution, that to bring somebody into freedom from that. But then what they really are wanting is a different life. What they are really wanting is a different identity from the one this life has given them. And the only way to that is through Jesus Christ. Honestly, there isn't another faith that can provide that. And I know that's a longer conversation that we could talk about, but I realized very soon I'm wanting to meet this physical need, which matters. And Jesus demonstrated that it mattered. But if I stop there, it isn't ultimately meeting the cry of their soul. And that matters too. But I think that we can trust the Lord with some of that, in the same way that one organization doesn't need to see themselves as I'm going to be the expert in this and this and this, and I'm going to take this person all the way from here to this point, and then be able to tell the world that I accomplished all of this, essentially on my own. And I don't think it needs to be that way. It can be, God opened the door for me to be part of this person's life, and to trust that this story will attach to the larger story that is their own, and that he will use that to reveal himself in them. And then it may be a series of relationships and a series of steps along the way. And our responsibility is to be true to that calling. As I said, to not hide who we are or why, to not take a credit that doesn't belong to us, but to leave the outcome of that in his hands.
I really think that's how the body of Christ functions. I mean, the universal church, the true believers together, because I want to do all the things that I see you do. And I want to do all the things that everyone I see who inspires me, I want to do all those things, but that's not realistic, right? And at the same time, it's so easy to I'm so limited. There's so little I can do. But all of us together, there is so much. I mean, Jesus said, you will do greater things than Jesus. I mean, all of us together are called to greater things because we are the body of Christ, because we have so many, between all of us, we touch probably every single life on the planet. Chances are, I would say, I don't know, I've never thought about this, but if you take all of the followers of Christ, chances are, with all of the relationships we all have, we're probably touching every single human being on the planet or close to that. And that means that between all of us, we have the ability to talk to someone and then to share the love of Christ in practical ways like you do. And it just all of us together, we do this. And through many relationships, that's how we are the light of the world, right? It's not one person trying to do everything. I don't think that's what Jesus taught. He didn't have one disciple. He had 12.
Yeah.
Who then, who then made 12, who made 12. And again, it's more of a, it's a team effort. I think in our very Western individualistic societies, we forget that it's a team effort, right? We want to do it all ourselves, and today, preferably.
You're right.
And that's just not realistic.
No, it's not. And to that point, he was Jesus, the Son of God, and he still had disciples. Like he
didn't heal everyone.
Yeah.
And he didn't heal everyone. And even he did not heal everyone. He could have. It's not that he had limited power. It's just that he chose to delay some of the healing to go through his disciples, or for those healings or miracles to take place through the doorway of death. But he didn't do it all. So why should we? At the same time, I think we put on ourselves greater expectations than he does. He is, his burden is easy and his yoke is light, for sure.
And even, as far as ending human trafficking existed at that time too, and it didn't end in his lifetime. I think there's so much brokenness that we would love to see healed, and that question of why this suffering remains, those are difficult questions to answer. But what you're saying too is to what you're, to that point, that those expectations, those things all cannot be healed and redeemed until the world itself is redeemed. So to be able to snuff out all of the ways that evil is able to permeate, and it is incredibly creative, and finds new ways to act through and with us all the time. So I think setting that expectation isn't even something he modeled for us, to expect that we could do that. But with what you're saying too, like sometimes I also think, and I'm speaking to myself too, we overlook so much that I think, because you can feel so helpless and I can't do this over there, but we overlook so much that is in our world and is within our reach, because we can tend to focus on international needs, which I think we all have to have a perspective that way. Like we are all part of this humanity. My kids and I have talked about this, like the last couple of years, like some of the things that we have taken away from it are things that I didn't recognize or appreciate before, until life broke us in a few ways. And one of those things is the kindness of strangers. I cannot even tell you, I honestly can't even tell you, like some of the loneliness some days for my kids, or the feeling of isolation, was so overwhelming. That we really started, my children and I tried to make a really intentional effort at noticing God speaking to us through strangers some days, because that was the way that was the only way we knew to see it on that way, the only voice that it was going to come through. And I remember the first time it happened, and it was just in a store, and it was somebody who spoke so kindly to us. And my son said, I saw Jesus in that, and I saw Jesus in that lady today. And that became the way that we would say it. It brought me to tears so many times. And it was a stranger who was just kind. And the reality is, like, we have no idea what is going on in the lives of the people all around us. Like when you exchange that cup of coffee or whatever it is, you have no idea. And now I know, like, you can literally like save that person sometimes, help them get through the day just by looking them in the eye, by giving them kindness when they are hungry for it. It doesn't always take this massive act, and so recognizing in our daily lives, we're engaging with strangers all the time, and the opportunities that we have in every single one of those engagements to do that.
I needed to hear that. Thank you. We're beginning to wrap up. And actually, your last few words are an incredible segue into the series we're currently teaching on Gospel Spice, which is about the spiritual disciplines and basically the lifestyle of a disciple of Jesus. And you just described it. I think random acts of kindness is the ultimate lifestyle of a follower of Jesus in some ways. So what would you tell us if, you and I were having this conversation about what does it look like on a day-to-day basis to have a life that reflects what we believe, that is a Christ follower? What does that look like for you, for the people around you?
I don't feel like I have this wonderful insight into that question right now at this particular point in my life. I would say like I've been in a particularly difficult season spiritually. And in the last couple of years, there were a couple times, just after my kiddos would go to sleep and they were asleep and couldn't hear me. And, you're weeping on the closet floor, as many of us know what that's like. But I remember saying to the Lord, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't hold on to faith in you. I will teach my children to believe in you, but I cannot hold on anymore. And in both of those moments, I felt such a profound sense of someone or something holding on to me. And I know it was something real, and it was enough in that moment. I still don't have all the answers I wish I had. I don't have the explanations I long for. And I don't have a vision of the way forward. I don't know what life looks like. And that is so strange. I feel like for my whole life, I had some sense of what it was going to, what it should look like moving forward. And I don't. It's trying to rebuild. And I think when you're like in your 40s, it's a little hard to figure out how to do that and what that looks like. So the way I would answer that question is, I don't think I'm any example of what it looks like to be a disciple in that way. I can't tell you, I believe that he's real, and I believe that he is who he says he is. I wish I had longer, because I would tell you a particular story about that really convinced me of that and brought that point home for me. But I do believe that he is faithful and good and true. And I think we have to remember to us that in this life, somebody said to us at one point, this is happening to you, but it's not about you. And even that perspective of shifting that perspective, that as disciples of God, we are part of this much larger story that we cannot see and we do not know. But I think even the things that flatten us, I was talking to a counselor once, and he said, like, well, how do you feel? And I was like, absolutely broken, like shredded. Like, there aren't the words, like there's just nothing left inside. And his response to me is, well, then I think you're in the perfect place for God to use you. I think part of the life of discipleship for the Lord is recognizing that this life will break us. And we will not have all the answers that we long for. But that he actually told us that. He gave us that foresight, and that he is faithful, and he doesn't leave. Like, he doesn't leave, and he will sit in us with it. And this is not the end of the story.
I don't think you have to be on the other side of the desert to be able to share wisdom from within it. And so the fact that you're able to see and cling to the truth that there is more than death and brokenness, even though that's all you feel, that's real faith, isn't it? That's the definition of faith, isn't that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. It's not faith when it all makes sense, right? So I think when you are faced with having to make that choice is probably when it becomes real. And real isn't always smooth and easy, but it's deep and it's got roots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a rawness of sharing what you see when you're in the middle of the desert, that you just simply don't have when you're on the other side of it, right?
Yeah, and actually, I remember even as a kid growing up in the church, I did always notice, if there was like testimony night at church, it seemed like we tend to share our testimonies when we're on the other side, right? It was the story of like what had been happening in this person's life for all these months or years and nobody knew about, but now it had kind of resolved. And so now it was okay to tell the story. And as a kid, I remember thinking, why does nobody tell those stories like when they're in it, and now I know I'm sure there are a lot of reasons for that. And I understand a lot of reasons for that, but I think we do each other a disservice with that and ourselves. By not going to those places when it all doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that forces us to start believing that the only thing that matters is the destination when we're on the other side of the suffering, when really we spend most of our lives in the middle of it.
Yes.
And so if we can't articulate for the sojourner alongside us who's going through a desert, it might be different. I mean, it might be depression, anxiety, loneliness, overwhelm, whatever people are going through. Most of us are going through some kind of desert of some sort. And if it only gets validated once it's nicely wrapped in a bow, then does it ever get mentioned? And then how are we helping one another?
Yeah. And like, I think too, I think probably one of the greatest, maybe I shouldn't phrase it that way, but I think a really significant role of the body of Christ is to help each other through it. And I think right now, it feels a little bit more like when you're suffering, like you have to do that alone. And boy, we can pummel each other really, really hard.
Yeah.
And that seems like so deeply sad to me, because I think part of what the body is for is that God knew how difficult this life was going to be, and that we were supposed to have that in each other. And instead of coming alongside each other and helping each other survive, we can tend to take our shots. And I think those wounds from those that are supposed to come alongside you can be fatal in some ways. I think some people walk away and might never come back, So I think while we want to take it back to what we were saying, this desire to heal the world and to right the wrongs in the world is good and true, and we should never lose it. But we've got so much at our fingertips that we could do to help bring healing to the ones around us. And we can very easily walk away from that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a song. I forget. It was my daughter who was playing it a while back, and it really struck me. I think it's the title of the song is To Dream Small. Isn't that so countercultural? And I took it, I think it's actually so important to dream small, like to focus on the small little things in front of you instead of the big picture dreams that we can have and that are so far-fetched. And it doesn't mean we can't do them, but like you said, when you were talking earlier about financial planning, and like you want to focus in the long-term goals, but you also want to look at short-term. So what can you do today in your circle? What's the little dream, the small dream, the dreaming small that you can do today that contributes to the big picture? But to dream small is not a bad thing necessarily.
I actually love that. I haven't heard that.
So I forget. I think it was a song. I should look it up. It was a while back, but anyway. Okay, as we're finishing, from the middle of the valley, the middle of the desert, what would you tell someone who finds themselves in that same place? Well, we just said we have things to share when we're in the middle of it.
I think you have to go back to what you believe to be true, because it does ultimately come down to that question. The story of Job, I think, is so profound to me there at the end, where Job finally questions God, right? He's taken all these things that have come and he hasn't questioned me. He finally questions him. And when I was young, I used to read like the Lord's response in kind of this booming way, where he says, "Where were you when I, formed the foundations of the world? Where were you when I separated land from it?" And he names all these things. And when I was younger, I felt like it was like, ooh, Job was kind of getting scolded for how dare you.
Yeah, he gets put back in his place kind of thing. Yeah.
And I don't know. I have to say at this point, I now like read it and hear it in the kindest of voices, of reminding him of those things, because ultimately God is saying, like, who do you believe that I am? He never answers Job's question. And it was the answer that Job would have wanted to hear. It was the easiest answer. It was, this is not about anything you did. It's because you were so righteous. But he doesn't give him that. And there has to be a reason for it. Instead, he gave him the answer to all questions from Job and from all the rest of us for all time. Who do you believe that I am? And I think it does come down to that. I think trusting again, like in that larger story, and that this is not the end of the story, and recognizing that I think when we get to those places of depression, you feel so useless as a person, and these dark moments and these dark thoughts fail to see the places and the people in your life that need you, and that you have played a role in who they are, and that you can't be replaced with. And I think, like, for me, that was my kids in the last couple of years. And that's not always easy because, like, you know, when you have children, you can't even grieve the way you want to grieve. If you just want to, like, completely cry and lose it, you can't do that in front of them. So you have to grieve someone on their terms. But whether it's through children or through a friendship or through, you know, a variety of ways in this life, like, each person has a particular purpose that I believe God has given them. Hanging on to what you believe about who He is and what you believe is true. He will not leave. It might not look like we thought it would or should, but recognizing that there is a place that we matter now today to people around us, and we can still have that impact, whether it's the ones we know and whether it's the strangers. It has changed the way I relate. I'm introverted, as we said. I relate differently in stores now because I've been on the other side. I feel like I needed the way that person spoke to me that day, and to remember that I can actually be that for someone.
Naomi, seriously, you are such a bright light. I know it might be hard for you to even believe it, but it's true. Being on the sidelines, like, I'm cheering you on. My heart is so for you. And if my heart is any indication of God's love for you, I mean, His heart is so totally for you and for your children. The grace and the beauty coming your way are just simply inescapable. I cannot wait to see, because like you said, the story is not over. And yes, there's beauty in the desert, but we're not made to stay there. And so it is temporary, and that gives us strength to know it's temporary. So would you, I love to ask my dear friends to end praying for, maybe pray for this, for our audience and for this coming year. And just would you close us together in prayer?
Okay. All right. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity to remember this, this gift that it is to be human, as messy and as difficult as it is. We were made in the image of a loving God who does not leave us, who has an end of the story for us, and who has redemption for us on the other side. And help us to respond to the opportunities that we have, to the people around us right now, to the larger world, to some of the particular needs, the atrocities, the sadness that's out there. And to be able to provide for somebody else is truly a remarkable thing. And for those who are in the valley, Lord, I just pray that you will meet them where they are. You will help them to see those lifelines that you extend to them through the voice of another, through the relationship of another. So help them to see, to be able to believe, and to keep walking forward. Thank you for this friendship, Lord. Thank you for what it means to me. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, friend.
Hi, Jonah here. Thank you for being part of the Gospel Spice family. If you've enjoyed this episode, you will love receiving our newsletter. It contains value-packed free gifts and rich content each month. It's at gospelspice.com/sign-up. There is always something new and exciting happening around here, and I don't want you to miss out. Sign up at gospelspice.com/sign-up. Did you know Gospel Spice has a YouTube channel? There's exclusive content there too, so join Gospel Spice on YouTube. Also, please give us a star rating and a comment on your podcast listening app. Your reviews actually really do make a difference to help others discover and experience Gospel Spice. As always, we are praying for you. You can confidentially email us your prayer requests and praise items at the email address contact@gospelspice.com. It's our privilege to pray for you. So, I'll leave you with 4 things to do. Please pick one and do it at your convenience. 1. Sign up on our website for our newsletter to receive gifts you're going to love. 2. Find us on YouTube and see what content we've put together to help you grow closer to Jesus. 3. Rate Gospel Spice on your listening app. It's one of the easiest ways to share the gospel. And finally, 4. Tell us how we can pray for you. Merci.